Welcome to IAB Canada's podcast, The Business of Digital.
Within hours.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. The IAB Canada Business of Digital discussion today is going to be around creative and the Cannes Lion Festival. And we are so pleased to have Karen Howe with us. She is the founder of the Township, as well as a member of the Cannes Advisory Board, and she's been doing this since 2013. So we're so pleased to have her here because of the fact that she's a veteran, not only in actually being in the trenches creating creative, but also now in identifying trends and looking at how we sort out what does good look like in the creative world. So good morning, Karen, and thanks so much for coming to visit us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Amazing. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about Cannes Lion and maybe just get some background on the festival and what's it about and how does it work?
Sure. I think a lot of people mix it up with the Cannes Film Festival. Unfortunately, we do not get Brad Pitt. We do not get the heavy hitters like George Clooney, but we certainly get the stars of advertising. What Cannes is it's the largest festival of creativity in the world. And just to give you an idea of scope, 20,000 people attend every year from almost 100 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, it's big. And it really is, I always think it's akin to the Olympics of creativity. The good news is they don't have the mandatory drug testing, which I think makes it better than the Olympics. But it really is that big. And it's a big deal. It happens once a year in Cannes. Mm-hmm. And I think what's important about it is it really helps to set the standard, the global standards of creative excellence, and it inspires us.
Mm-hmm. And does everyone go, or what's how does it work? How are you specially selected to actually even attend? Or
no, you just you pay to attend.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is it's about 5 days long, and it's not just an award show. The who's who of our business comes there. It's the who's who of technology and creative and media and entertainment. Mm-hmm. And there are over 600 speakers. So while the award show itself is going on and work is being judged and being posted in real time, shortlisted, at the same time there's workshops and panels and speeches by the who's who, some of the smartest, brightest minds in our business. Mm-hmm. So it really is a phenomenal kickstart to creativity in many different levels. And I'd also say it's terrific for anybody in business. It helps you to think differently, think bigger, be inspired.
I would agree with that. Last year was, I've been in the media business for 20 some odd years. And last year was the first time, I'm almost embarrassed to say, it was the first time that I attended Cannes, mm-hmm. As also part of the advisory board here in Toronto with the Globe and Mail. And I found it surprisingly inspiring. And we attend conferences all the time,
yeah.
And we see the who's of the media business all the time. But even there was a presentation by Marie Kondo
mm-hmm.
that inspired me so deeply, and the fact that I saw it in an environment that was around the advertising business, the media business. It really helped me to think about media differently, right? Decluttering media and all that sort of stuff. And it's just incredible to see the mixture of talent that is on stage. Talking about stuff.
I too went to that presentation. It's funny to me how she's gone from a closet organizer to a cult. But it was standing room only. It was great.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that's very interesting that you've touched on about Cannes is it really is a reflection of culture. A lot of times I go there to get my finger on the pulse of what's going on around the world culturally, mm-hmm. because when you think about it, so much of advertising is knowing what is going on, because in order to communicate a message to people, you really have to be culturally relevant. You really need to know what is going on in order to have messaging that resonates with them or that they even care about. So I think that it's a great snapshot, Cannes is, of what's going on in the world from a cultural standpoint, and she's exactly a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, so to that point, I mean, if you've been doing this now for 7 years, roughly, what do you think? If I were to ask you around trends, what have you been seeing over the past, better part of a decade in terms of, themes and creative, I guess, progression over the years in terms of like winners and even submissions?
I would say that there are 4 key themes that I've watched grow over the last several years that I think are very interesting and really important for us to understand. And I guess the first one would be the power of purpose. I think that for brands and organizations to be relevant to us, to culture, to society, from millennials to boomers to anybody, brands need to stand for more than just profit. They need to have a cultural touchstone that informs everything they do. They need to have a backbone of social conscience that informs the way they reach out to the community. I'll give you an example. Wayfarer or Tom's Shoes or Patagonia are brands that I think are exceptional for standing for something beyond just profits. Patagonia does that wonderful full-page ad that says, "Don't buy this jacket." And it's all about it's augured around Black Friday. What they want you to do is not buy on that day. Mm-hmm. They want you to keep what you've already bought, just repair it and fix it. And what they do is on Black Friday, they give all their profits every year to eco-based charities. They are a very eco-based brand, and they walk the walk, so they're legitimate about it. And so I'm seeing brands finally figure out that if they're just about, opening your wallet and sucking dollars out, people will turn away from those brands, and they are turning away from those brands. Mm-hmm. So I've watched that flourish over the last few years. I think that's really great.
So to that end, when you look at purpose, do you feel that there's been a shift? Like, certainly in last year, I was really impressed with some of the conversations last year around a bit of a misalignment that brands have had over the past years around, I guess, purpose washing. And this idea of whether, there's a separation of brands that are doing this because it's a trend, so they're jumping on the bandwagon. And then there's brands that have this in their DNA, or they've baked it into their DNA. Are you seeing from a creative standpoint that there's a little bit of like a bullshit meter from a consumer perspective, where they're actually transcending the creative and understanding on a deeper level whether this is part of the organization or part of their message?
Well, that is exactly the word that was the buzz of Cannes last year. Was purpose washing. Don't make it be window dressing. It's like eco washing. Several years ago, when it became a really important thing for brands to be eco conscious, people were slapping that little crocodile logo on their everything they did and said, "Hey, we're done. We're eco conscious." Mm-hmm. And in fact, the bullshit meter is much more highly attuned now than ever, which is why if you commit to a purpose, it has to be internal and external. It has to be legitimate. It has to be long-term. It has to be meaningful. It really does have to be part of your brand DNA, or you'll be called out in social. Mm-hmm. So that was so it's, at the same time I've seen this ascendancy of brands understanding that purpose is important, I've also seen the realignment of them understanding that it needs to be legitimate versus purpose washing. So I think that's a great thing to bring up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and we've seen it, we do a lot of work around ethics now, right? So mm-hmm. ethical use of media, ethical messaging, and all that stuff. And we've seen a couple of really interesting presentations where, you've almost got like an ethical, chief ethical officer.
Yep.
That is now starting to do audits within an organization to say, we make a claim of, let's say, a biodegradable fork. So let's just, look at our purchasing and make sure that all of the forks across the board, especially if I'm a franchisor, are in fact biodegradable. And then understanding, from a moral and an ethical standpoint, whether or not, biodegradable means within 20 years, mm-hmm. or does it mean within, maybe, 2 years or 1 year? Where is the meter, where's our standard, and where's the benchmark for truly, mm-hmm. Making statements like that, which I find really interesting. And it's almost like it's a win-win win-win investment on the side of the brand.
Yeah, I think it's a great and positive change. Another thing that I've seen, go from just being a buzzword to being a reality is diversity. And what I mean by that is I'm now seeing work that commonly has biracial couples in it, or there's sexual orientation has become, like, I'm seeing lots of same-sex couples being reflected in advertising now. I'm seeing work that includes people with challenges with ability, physical abilities. So all that to me is a very positive and good thing, because rather than calling it diversity, let's just call it inclusivity. Sure. I'm seeing a great uptick in that kind of social awareness. And again, I think that's a very positive thing that I'm seeing overall in the marketplace. Do you feel like you see the same thing?
I think so. I think that I'm certainly seeing the same thing on the screen. Let's just say I feel like I'm seeing I feel like I'm seeing some really good progress on that front on screen. I'm wondering, now I will wonder out loud, is that also reflected on the creative teams that are working on the creative? And do you have any insight into that? Do you think that we are also seeing in the creative, I guess, in the category or in the industry, that we're doing enough to be inclusive on the creator side?
We're going right to the heart of the matter. No, you know what? That's a great observation. There isn't the same kind of diversity, I think, reflected in the creative departments of agencies. And that's something I think we struggle with as an industry. I think that we're, largely male. In fact, fewer than 10% of the creative directors around the world are female. Still, I mean, those numbers aren't great considering the population ratio. Also, when you consider that 85% of purchase decisions are made by women, so they are the keepers of the wallet. I think overarchingly, our creative departments are too white, too male, and too young. And it's interesting to me because I work with a lot of very senior clients, and diversity of age is something that comes up again and again and again in our business, because we have a huge marketplace out there offering of products that appeal to people that are in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, but we don't necessarily have people in creative departments who can meaningfully create communication to that target group. So I think we've got some work to do. We've definitely got some work to do, and it is going to be and is reflected in the work. Particularly, I see the work that I see talking to an older target group. I'd like to call it a brand that I think does a good job of it. Nike. They did a great campaign called Sister Madonna, and they focused on a nun who was 83 years old, who was this tremendous triathlete. Wow. And she held her up as an example of, just doing it, going above and beyond, just committing to something and loving it, and to hell with the obstacles. But they're one of the very few brands that would be brave enough, has been brave enough to use a spokesperson north of the age of 60. Another brand that I'm watching do it, which I find very positive, is L'Oreal. They use Helen Mirren as their beauty ambassador. She's, I think, 67 now. Yeah. So I think those are good and positive changes, but am I seeing them on the other side of the equation in the agencies? No, not yet.
Right.
So it's an interesting...
Yeah, and I wonder,
question.
What can we do? I mean, what can the industry do to solve something like that? Because it seems like a really deep-rooted problem.
Well, it's funny because I see two sides of the coin and I can't quite figure it out. Senior people are more expensive. They just are. Command higher salaries. We know that there's tremendous pressure on the bottom line for agencies now. We're kind of reshuffling ourselves and trying to figure out who we are and where we're going. But, you can make the argument that they know things that 27-year-olds don't know. They get to a solution faster because they've got the years of experience behind them. But the other thing is, I think that agencies are not listening to clients, because clients want a senior person sitting across the desk from them. There are big problems going on. The global marketplace, I think Phil Knight said, marketing is just war without the bullets. And I think he's right. It's really tough out there right now. Our competition is global. It's around the clock. We have a fragmented attention span with our audience now. They're toggling in their tech. They're going from sending an email to, texting to, surfing on, streaming Netflix. So trying to get your message through is so much more difficult now than it ever was before. And I just see clients that, when they've got a $20 million check in their hand and they're trying to build out a campaign, they want to see someone with some seniority under their belt across the table. But I don't think agencies are hearing that enough. So I find that there's a frustration. It's almost like clients and agencies are speaking different languages sometimes. They're working across purposes.
Yeah, one thing that I think I've noticed as well, and this is the media industry as well as the creative industry, is that culture is so very, very important within an agency environment.
Yes.
Right. So you're sitting on square blocks. You're you're having these crazy sort of offsite events, right? So it started with, I guess, throwing hatchets at things and stuff like that, and so there's almost like a nightlife that is exclusive to an agency culture that more senior individuals may not be able to participate in as readily, right? Because of other responsibilities, or because they're just not in that space anymore. So I wonder if that also comes into play, that whole idea of culture, and when we love to watch people having fun, and a client who understands that an agency is young, they're going out all the time, they're the creative juices are flowing because there's such great communication. I wonder how we can bridge that gap from a cultural perspective and sort of make it cool again to have that kind of a diversity within an office culture.
I don't know. We're going to have to figure it out, though. Our clients are going to do it for us, because totally. I hear rumblings, and I feel that diversity isn't just sexual orientation, and it isn't just race, and it isn't physical ability. It includes age, a reflection of a cross section of ages. So it's something we've got to figure out, or it'll get figured out for us. And I guess what goes with that, as I said, is there is still always the tension of budget. Because if you want senior resources around the table, you're going to have to pay for them. And the really smart clients, and there was Apple, Ken said, the global CMO said, I realize I got to pay for that kind of wattage, and he's fine about doing that. Great. So I think there's kind of a bunch of stars need to be lined up either forcefully, or we'll just kind of start to go that way.
Well, good.
But I do see rays of brands that I think are always ahead of the curve, and Nike's one of them, and L'Oreal's another one, that are already getting it. You asked about other trends that I've seen and that I see picking up steam. The other one is emotion, the use of emotion. ROE, return on emotion, is the new ROI. I think that smarter brands are really starting to figure out that you can't just spout numbers at people and stats, and I call that nuts and bolts advertising. It's not meaningful to people. They just don't care. And I think that if you want to connect with people, transform the way they think or they behave or what they do, you need to be able to find a way to get in and connect with them emotionally. And I think that's, I've seen work, and it can be a cross-section of emotions. It doesn't have to be just joy. It can be disgust. It can be anger. It can be make them laugh. I mean, all those things are valid. But I think as a brand, if you can't build a bond with people, you're in trouble. Because I've seen neuroscientific studies that show that 90% of our decisions are made with our heart, not our head. So we make our decisions with our heart emotionally, and then we sort of backfill the rationale. And I'm seeing increasingly smart brands and organizations are figuring that out, and they're using it in a good and powerful way.
Yeah, we just did a seminar around branded content and creating, I guess, branded content, and what are some of the reasons why it's effective. And to your point about the heart, people making decisions with the heart, there was a study that we talked about that was about the release of, or the creation of oxytocin. Like there's a hormonal response that drives a connection between a story and an individual. One that could just never be achieved through throwing numbers and facts at people. And the minute you make that connection, there is this hormone that is secreted, and it actually is the hormone of love, of connection, and of safety, right? So you feel, what follows obviously there is trust, right? And loyalty, and wanting to come back to the trough for more of it. So I think that there's even beyond the idea of buying with the heart, there's like a real now we're getting to sort of the science behind creative, which I wanted to ask you about as well, because it's all fine and well to talk about ROI and return on investment, and I think you and I have chatted in the past around the fact that at some point we have to look at what was effective in actually selling widgets, right? So in terms of actual, what is, there's almost like two categories, left and right side of the brain, if you will,
Yep.
right? So there's the creative that resonates, that in a group environment people laugh, people cry together. And then on the right-hand side, there's the creative that actually sells a widget. It sells a phone. It sells a pair of running shoes. So what do we do moving forward when it follows that it takes time to build trust, it takes time to build your content, it takes time to build a story, and we're living in this world of scarcity where people want to see results right here, right now. And how do we come together and sort of decide how long it takes to build out that trust and that connection with a consumer, and keep it in line with sort of selling stuff?
Well, building out trust is a different thing. But I'm going to go back to your original question when we talked about emotion and whether or not that was whether the science of it, whether or not it actually delivered the numbers. I think that we never lose sight of our business. What our business is, it is the intersection of business. It's commerce meets art. It's not art in splendid isolation, and it's not emotion in splendid isolation. When we start to create a communication, there's always a strategy, an objective that we hold ourselves to. I mean, that's our operating model when we're creating anything that we do. But I do think trust is something you earn, but I also think emotion is absolutely immediate. So I think that's a great starting place. But I think, the bigger question of whether or not, so can you build widgets? That's our job. Our widget can be, I've got to sell 45 sets of tires, or it can be, I need you to feel differently about my brand. I need you to open your door to me. So I think that those are things we never lose sight of, as that's our job to do. Trust is a different one. That's a very interesting one. To me, there has to be a consistency of brand for you to have credibility out in the marketplace, which is a longer term play for sure. And you have to be right in all those places. You have to be consistent in all those touch points, those consumer touch points.
So I'm gonna go at this slightly asking it a little bit differently. So if have you definitively seen the connection between emotion and sales?
Yes, I have, because when you like a brand, you will consider a brand, and that is job one. You won't. Certain brands. Okay, I guess I have to qualify that. I think we're more inclined to pick a mortgage on an interest rate.
Right.
But let's say all mortgages are equal.
Yes.
Which one am I going to pick? Why? I'll pick the bank that I can relate to, that emotionally I feel like is on the same wavelength as me. And to me, that is the soft play.
And do you think, in the results at Cannes and the way that the submissions work, is the correlation undisputable that the connection, the best connecting creative also happens to be the best performing creative?
I think you have to look at it. I think I'd put that a different way. If you didn't like a brand, would you buy from them?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. But then it comes in, don't want to, hijack the conversation on the media front. But then media comes in and says, okay, well, we can play the frequency game, right? And we can play the recency and the frequency game and make sure that this brand is in front of you so that you feel that this is the best option.
No, you know what? It's still not compelling, because you have to trigger something that changes someone's behavior. And frequency, I don't buy, does it. We've all had those commercials that we've seen on air that play every break 3 times.
Yes.
That drive you crazy.
Totally crazy.
If you love them, that would be fine. But if you don't love them, it doesn't matter how many times I throw that message at you. I'm not going to convert you.
In fact, there's a law of diminishing return.
There is.
Yeah.
And in fact, that brand irritant factor can be a real problem.
Yeah.
So I think that everybody has to, what I see the most glorious work is when everyone works together. Right. You want frequency deployed in the right way. Media comes down to one big thing. It's the right message at the right time to the right person. but I guess the part of it is the right message. And, you know, I guess what I think about, there's one spot I think we've both seen this year that I'm not sure everybody's seen, but it's for gun control. And when it starts out, it's a group of employees is being told that they're going to be, you know, someone's here to talk to them about this subject and walk them through it and train them to be prepared. And a young girl walks in. It's an 11-year-old who's going to be taking these employees through this drill for what you do if there's a shooter in an office site, and she just is so matter of fact about, you have to hide here, stand on a toilet seat, don't let your feet be seen behind the stall, don't make a sound because then the shooter can find you. She's just very matter of fact about giving you all the things, you know, because she's had lockdown drills at school. It is a profoundly shocking commercial. And I think it made everybody, even people who didn't care about gun control, notice it and think about it.
Shook them to
It
the
shook
core.
them. It shook them to the core. I think if you just spouted statistics at someone and put that commercial up 14 times an hour, it would never have achieved the punch in the gut that was needed.
It's been decades. It's been decades, so clearly that hasn't been effective, right? So wow, that's a really great example to raise.
But data, you know, has, like, look at the wonderful commercial that was done this year. Go Back to Africa. Wonderful campaign. I shouldn't say commercial. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant use of data and numbers and retargeting and surgical focus in terms of being able to talk to a particular person in a customized way. But it still needed to work in lockstep with a great, big, wonderful idea. So I don't think that one's more important than the other, but I think they work best together. And you know, I was thinking about the Accenture thing. When Accenture bought Droga this year, Droga 5, that said a lot to me. It says to me, data's not enough. You know?
I agree. That example, that Go Back to Africa is such a great example, and it's also another example of the same ilk would be the DNA, the Aeromexico DNA one from, I guess it was 2 years ago, but
it was last year.
Was it last year?
Great.
It's fantastic, right? Again, you know, tying in, like current and you know, behaviors that are already existing. We're already looking into ancestry. We're looking into our DNA, and then tying it into a discount, an actual discount on an airfare.
Brilliant.
It's just you know, it ticks all the boxes there. So,
and I think the big thing there was they grabbed onto the coattails of a cultural moment. I mean, that's why I think it's so important. And I think the number one job for all of us is to have our finger on the pulse of what's going on culturally around the world, because that's what turns up opportunities like that, is knowing that, like, I think the numbers were 30 million people have had their DNA tested over the last 3 years, which to me is remarkable. And they have their own reasons for doing it. But to think of that and then to marry it to a basically, you're right, a retail promotion for, you know, flights for tourism is just so genius. Brilliant. It's finding an opportunity where nobody saw one.
Totally. And I think that, you know, in looking at, I guess, modern day advertising, 21st century advertising, the opportunities are endless to actually put your finger on the pulse through social listening, through all of the different tools that we have available. And, you know, consumers, by and large, are an open book. Right? They're, you know, and that's, you know, obviously we're working on that on the media front, on privacy and boundaries and all that. But,
that's challenging.
The behaviors, it will be challenging. It will be challenging, and I think that that's going to trickle into the creative process, possibly, right? This idea of, I don't want my data being taken advantage of. I don't want to be zeroed out in a crowd. I just want to be who I want to be, do what I want to do on a media front. So it might be a little bit more difficult in the coming years to be able to actually, you know, do that, you know, right place, right time kind of ad, and we'll be looking at moving more into contextual relevance, right? So contextually placed advertising, which is not the end of the world. It's how this industry started, right? So, you know, I think that there's, you know, we've matured a lot, and there's probably going to be a lot of other opportunities that arise out of our, you know, privacy revolution.
I saw a really interesting campaign that's so low tech, you know, so contrary to kind of our new world where we're so contextual. But it was contextual in a different way. It made me laugh, and it was smart. It was for extra gum. And the issue was that gum sales have been on the decline for a decade now. And they took a really hard look at why. people thought, is it people are smoking less, they're not chewing as much gum, or what? It turns out that the problem isn't is this. Gum is an impulse purchase. So a decade ago or even longer ago, when you're standing in line, you're bored out of your mind, you look over, you'd see a chocolate bar or a package of gum, you'd buy it. The problem is now you're on your phone. Mm-hmm. Your phone is distracting you. It's this digital intervention, and it was affecting gum sales. So I thought, are you ever smart to figure that out? So what they did is they created this activation that was at the cash level, so that when they were scanning your food, they would let you know if the food caused bad breath and trigger you to buy gum. So if you're buying tuna, or if you were buying garlic, or if you were buying cigarettes, a beep would happen, and it would remind you that maybe you want to think about buying some gum.
Hilarious.
Yeah, I thought that was so smart, though. They thought about the path to purchase and realized that that's where the problem was.
Well, that's incredible.
I thought it was clever.
Yeah, and also, I mean, with players that have, entered the scene on a media front like Loblaws and that kind of data and that kind of ability to insert ads right place, right time, right instance, I think is going to be, is going to open a lot of doors for the consumer packaged goods, and food industry. So that's a marvelous example. What else have you got? So you've seen a lot of purpose, diversity moving. You've looked at powerful ways of changing emotional, sort of the emotional quotient. What do you wish you were seeing? I mean, we talked a little bit about ageism and further diversity on the agency side, but is there anything else that you wish you could sort of, if you were wringing your hands and sort of saying, in 2020, I wish that the creative industry what would you fill the blank in with?
Well, beyond the diversity that we've already talked about within our own, look within our, what is it? Don't throw stones at glass houses. We have to look in our own backyards and see what we need to do about addressing diversity. It's a big issue, I think. I think diversity makes us better as an industry. I would say that the one thing I'd like to see more of, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of it, but we could always do more, is I would like to see creativity deployed in a bigger way to really address some of the significant social issues we're now facing. I think sustainability is a huge issue, climate change, extinction of species, poverty, child poverty, homelessness. I think there's a number of social issues plaguing us around the world that concern me deeply, that I wish more we turn our creativity towards. I think that we're doing some of it. I think there's more work to be done, and I'd love to see it if more creative people got helping to change so many of the significant issues, to find that big idea, I always describe it like this, as using our power for good instead of evil. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see an increase in it. I think we're on the path to goodness, but I think there's a lot more we could do, and I think there's a lot more that we need to do. I think we've got a lot of problems globally right now, and I think there's a lot more we could be doing.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Using our absolute power to change user behaviors and consumer behaviors for good. I can't think of a more honorable thought for 2020, and also this idea of because of the fact that you've noted this trend of actually the authenticity starting to seep through to these organizations. If we can sort of marry the idea of the power of advertising for good with actual action, and a change in how the brands behave, and a change in their policies internally, whether it's hiring or whether it's from a like fair supply chain side, to eliminating plastics, to doing whatever they can. Wow, what a tremendous, amazing outlook that brings to the creative field and to advertising in general.
I think that creative, I'm biased, I am a creative director by trade, but I think creativity is tremendously powerful, and I think creativity can change the world. On that,
I think that was, such a great discussion, and I'm so very happy to have had you here at our office. Karen, I wish you all the best in 2020, and I can't wait to see what trends you identify for the 2020 Cannes Lions.
Well, thanks for having me here today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on IAB Canada's podcast, The Business of Digital.